Well, good morning, everybody. For those of you who are standing at the back, there are quite a few seats still left. You have to struggle a bit to find them, but there should be room for everyone to sit down. Welcome to this morning's Neapolitan session. I'm not quite sure why it's called a Neapolitan session. Back in the day when I was young, back in the last century, a Neapolitan was a 3-flavored ice cream. It came in a large block. And the usual flavors were strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. Whether they'd ever been near a strawberry or indeed a cocoa bean, I have no idea. But anyway, it was a childhood favorite. Well, I can't promise you 3 different flavors of ice cream this morning, but I can promise you 3 very distinguished panelists and presenters. The fact that the chairs up here are empty does not mean that they are not in the room. They really are. They're just in front of me. I can see them all. And we're going to be looking, of course, at evaluating real user metrics in open access. My name's Byron Russell, and I head up Ingenta Connect. Ingenta Connect next year celebrates its 20th anniversary. Unbelievably, it's been going since 1998 and was one of the first aggregators and indexers of digital content. We started off by indexing all the big guys, people like Oxford University Press, for example. We're now better known as an aggregator and content publishing platform for small to medium-sized publishers, people like Policy Press and Amsterdam University Press. And we have about 86,000 registered librarians who regularly use the Ingenta Connect system. The evaluation of open access metrics is of particular interest to us because next year we're going to be launching a brand new open access platform called, appropriately enough, Ingenta Open. Ingenta Open will launch in January, and one of the things that we want to explore, and one of the things that I hope we will learn from sessions such as this, is how we can best evaluate and present the metrics that we find from using the platform. So without more ado, we've only got 45 minutes. Let me introduce the panel. So first of all, we have Amy Brand. Amy really needs no introduction. I'm sure many of you know her. She has been director of MIT Press since 2015, and previously she worked in senior positions with Digital Science, Harvard University, and Crossref. Then we have Hilary Corbett. Hilary is Director of Scholarly Communication and Digital Publishing at Northeastern University Libraries in Boston, Mass., where she's worked since 2005. She also works as the university's copyright officer, providing assistance to faculty, staff, and students on thorny intellectual property challenges. She is a current board member of SSP. And finally, our last panelist today will be Charles Watkinson. He's Associate University Librarian for Publishing at the University of Michigan Libraries and Director of University of Michigan Press. Previously, Charles was Director of Purdue University Press and Director of the American School of Classical Studies of Athens, which is interesting. He's been a board member of the Association of American University Presses and SSP. So we're going to have 3 sessions, each one lasting approximately 10 minutes each, focusing on a different aspect of the same theme. What do people really want to get out of open access metrics, and what do people from 3 diverse segments actually need? Each session, as I said, will last approximately 10 minutes, and there will be space for questions at the end. But do, during each session, reflect on the kind of questions that you might like to throw at each panelist at the end of the session. So, first of all, we'll have Amy exploring what authors and publishers want to learn from open access metrics. We'll then move on to Hilary, and Hilary will speak on what librarians will want to learn from OA metrics. And finally, Charles will take the stage to look at what funders will need to learn from OA metrics. So without more ado, let me pass on to Amy Brand.
Good morning. I'm Amy Brand, Director of the MIT Press. We're a publisher of books and journals across a fairly wide range of fields, and I'm happy to be talking about how we think about the impact of our open access publications now and what we imagine for the future. As Byron said, I've been asked to represent authors and publishers on this panel, and I think that the interests of authors and publishers are really well aligned when it comes to wanting to maximize access to and impact of their publications. And of course, that statement holds whether or not you're talking about open access or paid access to content. When I was thinking about this panel, and I was thinking about the question that librarians will be asking themselves when it comes to how do I serve the authors in my academic community? And that question really is, how does open access publishing impact academic careers? And how might I help my researchers use their open access publishing to their greatest professional advantage? Now, the great thing, of course, about open access publishing is we see lots of downloads. We see lots of activity on these publications. I'm just going to show you a few examples from the MIT Press. We're publishing a few new open access journals in neuroscience. And we are finding an incredible amount of very, very rapid, immediate activity on these publications. So this is an article that was published a few days ago, and in a matter of really hours, we had multiple tweets, and I guess you can't really see those numbers, blogs, a fairly respectable altmetric score. Another striking example is when we flipped journals from paid to open access. So this journal, Computational Linguistics, was traditional subscription through 2008. Then it became a society-subsidized open access journal in 2009, and we went from 15,000 downloads in 2008 to 85,000 downloads on articles in 2009 when the journal went open access. Whoops. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down here. Anyway, I'm just trying to see my own notes. What did I do on the somehow or other? I got out of the
screen.
No, but we lost the presentation.
Oh.
Oh, here we go. Okay, got it. So, and the other thing that we noticed when we went open access is we had penetration into, markets, if you will, or readers in parts of the world where we hadn't seen much downloaded activity or interest in this journal, so Eastern Europe and China and India. But what about the relationship between downloads and citation? So in this version of the chart, we're looking at download activity, and then the smaller light green lines are just impact factor, and we're not finding a correlation between the two. You would expect to see growth in impact factor show up after a couple of years, given normal publication and citation cycles. And in fact, I think the jury is really still out on how to describe the relationship between open access and impact. I think one thing that we're beginning to observe, which is interesting, is that there's a closer open access citation relationship in the book space. And that makes sense when you think about it, because for journals, there's a fairly well-developed digital supply chain. But for books that are coming online for the first time and are coming online open access, they're finding readers that they wouldn't have found before, those readers turning into authors. And so that's a really interesting thing to watch. We are doing a lot of open access book publishing at the press as well. This example is from our new relationship with the Internet Archive. I'm going to be on a panel tomorrow talking about that. We just started digitizing deep backlist books and making them openly available on the openlibrary.org. And for this first month, where we just had a couple hundred books up, we had 21,000 downloads. And I don't think you can see that there, but one particular book, which Brewster always refers to as his favorite, is a decades-old book called The Future of Libraries, which has been viewed 3,200 times on this platform. Now, another metric that's important to both authors and publishers, even in OA publishing, is actually print sales. We do a lot of open access books where we see significant print sales, and that matters to our authors. This particular book, within 1 year of publication, sold 50,000 copies at the same time that it was open access. And increasingly, we're working with authors who are demanding OA at the same time that they're demanding very generous royalties, maybe advances against those royalties. So it's a real balancing act for publishers. right now, because we don't really have all the information we need about what the relationship is between that kind of access and sales. We're using altmetric on our books, as you can see, in this case, Peter Sieber's book, Open Access, and this altmetric score. What's really useful, about this is being able to drill down, right? We want to be able to see not just this raw score, but what kinds of policy impact is this having? Policy documents that are accessing this publication, or I could be looking at syllabi, course adoption, so that's data that's coming from the Open Syllabus project. I imagine everyone in this room knows this, but I think it bears repeating, that whether you're talking about citation or download counts, dumb numbers have no negative or positive valence. And a lot of time when we see social media buzz or activity around publications, it's just because there's an interesting title, like you see here, The Neural Basis of Disgust for Cheese, right? It gets a lot of activity, and that's why it's really important to kind of drill down into this data until we have effective machine sentiment analysis. We tend to think about altmetrics as being most valuable as an author-facing tool. So these are tools that are helping us as publishers, as librarians, help our authors take more control over the story they tell about their scholarship and the impact that it's having. So for example, in this case, on altmetric.com, use this data to enhance your NIH biosketch. And I think that as librarians, thinking about how to use the data that's available through services like this to help your authors really curate their own list of publications and create a narrative or account of their impact is the best way to help them in open access publishing as well. In this particular case, it's a paid book, but you can inform your authors to, your research community members, to subscribe to information about their publications, and they'll get email updates on the altmetric activity on those publications. Another way to be really helpful is to have them, if they don't already, set up a Google Scholar profile. And that way you can curate your own list of publications and look at citation, H-index, et cetera. And what's really valuable about this, as opposed to relying, say, on some third-party, aggregation, is you're kind of moving beyond the author name disambiguation issues that arise in some of those third-party systems. Now, one set of questions that I became really interested in relation to this kind of data was what happens in the case of multi-authorship, which is increasingly common in the sciences, and author name order. I don't know if you can see it, but in that second publication, there are two authors. And this happens to be a journal where the author name order defaults to alphabetical. But what happens if actually the second author did more of the work? What does it mean for there to be 322 citation counts? Do both authors get to claim those citation counts? And so a few years back, a bunch of us began working on a system to help give credit where credit is due that I think will lead to more metrics down the road. We developed something called the credit taxonomy, and if you can read this here, we came up with a set of a number of roles. There are 14 things like data curation, formal analysis, investigation, and the like, and this is gaining ground in the publishing community and being widely adopted, and will soon be integrated into the Crossref metadata schema, which means that ultimately this will be machine-usable, machine-readable information. So imagine contributable metadata collected by publishers, deposited with Crossref. ORCID pulls metadata from Crossref, and then essentially you could generate a report that shows not just, this author authored these works, but what did this author actually contribute specifically to each of these works. And I think that that's going to be the basis of a whole new set of metrics. Now we're trying to do something very similar for peer review, and this is more relevant to open access per se. Sometimes open access publications are perceived as being less rigorous, rightly or wrongly, when in fact the kind of peer review that gets applied to a publication has absolutely nothing to do with business model. So if OA publication is somehow disadvantaging authors in the tenure and promotion process, what can we do about that? We've started using peer-reviewed tags on our publications at the MIT Press, as you can see on the this dust jacket here. But now imagine a taxonomy of types of peer review that could be defined in a number of different ways that becomes a standard system of tags. That would make assessments of rigor and quality completely independent from the brand, whether it's the publisher brand in the book case or the journal brand. And so this is our next big project in partnership with Mark Eddington at Amherst College Press. This is something that he sketched out. So again, values in this peer review taxonomy could be coded as metadata, become machine readable, integrated into downstream library and discovery systems, and again, become the basis of another form of really metric around publication that could become interesting. So from an author perspective, there are all kinds of ways of thinking about the value of your work. You know, is my work being accessed, downloads? Is it being read cover to cover? In the book publishing world, we have ways of tracking time in book for ebooks. Is it advancing scholarship? Is it generating media buzz? Is it influencing public policy? Is it being assigned in courses? Is it helping me get promoted? And that's where I think the credit and peer review stuff is going to come into play. Is it generating supplemental income, book sales? We didn't talk about reuse of data, but that's another metric that is gaining ground. Is it being integrated into other works? And what about diversity in scholarship and in fields? There are all kinds of ways of measuring the demographics of particular fields that I think are very interesting. But the key takeaway for librarians is being better equipped to help your author community manage and narrate the account of the impact that their publications are having. Thank you. Questions now or later?
Well, thanks very much indeed, Amy. That was really interesting and thought-provoking. I was particularly interested to see the rather surprising lack of correlation between impact and downloads, which certainly surprised me, and some great projects going on there, which I shall be following up with you later about. Now I'd like to call on Hilary, who's going to be talking about what libraries want to know about the usage of open access materials and why.
So the problem is pretty obvious. It's very difficult for libraries to gauge usage of open access content. There's a distinction to be made between content that we support financially, whether that's through a membership model, through packages that contain both toll access and open access titles, or through a central open access fund, and everything else. For the former, the usage stats that we get can serve as a measurement of return on investment. For the latter, in other words, at the everything else, usage information can serve broader goals, such as learning where users find their information, what types of sources they find valuable, how we might realign collection strategies, but how do we get at this information? Article-level metrics in open access journals provide some sense of ROI for articles that we may have funded through a membership discount or an open access fund coverage of the article processing charge. But it's not a one-to-one comparison, right? So metrics reflect every person who has used that article, not just our own users. So the ROI in that case becomes a measurement of altruism rather than service to our users. So there are several types of usage we'd like to know about. These are just a few examples. I'm sure there are more. For faculty research use, we can get to this through citation analysis, but it's very labor intensive, and we'll look at that some more in a couple of slides. We'd also like to know more about how our users are accessing gold OA content in hybrid journals that we don't subscribe to. Is the amount of content that they can access this way satisfactory enough, or would they prefer that we subscribe to all the journal content? And for the second to the last bullet there, what role does the content serve in research, the content that's not formally published but that they're accessing openly? And why do we want to know? For librarians, this may seem like a fairly obvious question to answer. There is kind of a collection development angle here, as well as a broader mission focus. We want to think about how open access content can fill gaps in what we subscribe to, how it could replace potentially some subscribed content, but also more broadly, how is it supporting research and instruction? And how is open access content, for example, able to serve as a component of our textbook affordability initiatives? And again, and more. So this pie chart, I don't know whether you can read all of the information in the back. This shows that out of 885 citations that our engineering faculty made in their published research in 2014, so a few years ago now, about half of those citations were to things we subscribed to, and about 40% were to things that were available open access. And if you assume that citation indicates significant usage of an item, so not just the clicking or the downloading and putting the PDF in your downloads folder and you never read it, if you actually cite something in your research, we assume that you've read it and absorbed the information, I hope. So if you assume that citation indicates significant usage of an item, this reveals that our faculty in this college are using open access materials almost as much as they're using our subscribed materials. This is really valuable information, but it took a lot of time to get this information. It's not a scalable process. So this is from a data set that my colleague Jen Ferguson and I are using for an ongoing citation analysis research project, and there are all kinds of really interesting applications of this data. But it requires a lot of human eyeball time and calculation time to get this. There's no way that just the two of us or just one library could get this kind of information for all of its users. And this is just faculty also. It's harder to find out what students are using. And as we know in libraries, user behavior is always a complicating factor. So it's already difficult to get a full picture of how they're accessing open access content by gathering usage statistics in the limited ways that are available to us, because we can only measure what gets accessed through our discovery system in some cases, and that in and of itself is an incomplete picture of what people are using. We know that they often start their literature search in Google Scholar or just even plain Google, and that goes for faculty as well as undergraduate and graduate students. And we also know that if they need something but run up against a paywall, either because we don't subscribe to it or they've gone through Google and not through our discovery system, they often try to obtain a free copy through a variety of other means. So that also makes tracking usage and access difficult. Where are they actually getting this from? Are they finding an open copy somewhere in a repository? Are they getting it from the author or from their colleague at another institution who maybe subscribes to the journal? There are a lot, this kind of work requires almost an ethnographic approach to get a complete picture of how our users are accessing open access materials, and that's really tough to do. Don't worry about writing these down. I'm going to give you an easier link to remember on the next slide. I just wanted to mention a couple of articles that I used in researching this about measuring the impact of gold open access content, and also measuring how one university measured the cost per use of articles that they were funding through their centralized open access fund. And the computer wants to do some updates. Sorry, it won't let me advance the slides anymore. I'm going to view the updates, sorry, because I have to get out of it. Yeah, and then it's... Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. Okay. Awesome. That worked better than I expected. So these are just a couple of articles. Surprisingly, there's not a lot of literature out there on this topic, because it seems like it's something that is really interesting to a lot of people in libraries and publishers as well. But I struggled to find published research on it, so maybe I'll publish an article. The link at the bottom there, the about.me/Hilary Corbett, you can find all of my presentations, including this one. So if you didn't catch the links to those articles, you can find them there. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Why is it that computers always remind you that updates are needed at the most crucial moment in whatever you happen to be doing, whether it's writing up a contract or answering an important email? Something that neither Microsoft nor Apple have solved. Okay, I shall pass swiftly over to Charles, who's going to be talking about what funders want to learn from open access metrics.
So I think probably it's logical to see Amy talk about publishers and authors and Hilary about libraries, but why would I be up here talking about funders? I think the main reason is just the diversity of funders that exist in this space, and the way in which our institutions are increasingly entering this open access funding space. There's a strategic conversation going on at the University of Michigan about how we should invest in open access, and I'm sure that's common at many of your institutions. And a particular focus currently is on how we should fund open access monographs. And later in this meeting, 12:45 today, there's a presentation in the Gold Ballroom at the Francis Marion, which is about the open access monograph publishing initiative from the AAU ARL institutions. So anyhow, so that's why I'm taking the liberty of talking a little bit about funders, but I mean, look at the diversity of funders in this space. Governments, foundations, institutions, libraries, and also in some cases individuals. So it's very difficult to generalize because of course these are entities with very different varying agendas. And when you look at their statements about why they're interested in open access, it's sometimes very hard to discern what's kind of actionable in there. And are they always clear themselves? I think we look at University of Michigan at what the president does all the time, and the president is talking a lot about public engagement at the moment. But it's increasingly clear that that was kind of a throwaway remark, right? It's like, we should engage more with the public. But what that actually means is a little bit less clear, and so we're all scurrying around trying to parse the words of this guru-like figure. So anyhow, and I think, you know, if you look at statements, there are a lot of visions out there that talk about very grand goals, and these are often foundations which have extremely sophisticated impact measurement going on internally, but the ways in which they measure impact is not always explicit or open or transparent. And it was interesting to hear the Gates Foundation speaking recently about how it's not very good sometimes at being open about its own internal processes and the way it thinks about impact and realizes that it could do better. And I think that would be very helpful. And then finally, another challenge here is the bluntness of tools at our disposal. I think Amy and Hilary have both referred to this. It's really hard to work out, especially in the book space, you know, what's going on in the open access environment, partly because of lack of comparability between reporting between our different platforms, the challenge of comparing similar closed to open content, privacy policies, a huge topic of debate, sometimes quite vigorous at our library at the moment, as I'm sure it is at yours, which actually do hinder our ability to know a lot of stuff that we would like to know about our open access users. So, I mean, this is extremely sort of personal perspective stuff, but when I see these conversations, I do see some common patterns emerging about what funders appear to want to know. Funders want to increase reuse, use and reuse, and are particularly interested in open licensing. So often in a funding statement about open access, you'll actually see the focus is on open licensing rather than necessarily free access as such. So what are the proxy measures for this sort of thing? Download advantage, citation advantage, but it has to be versus comparable closed access material. And I think this is where the work of Springer Nature, which has just been released, you may have seen their report released on October 7th, the OA effect, how does open access affect the usage of scholarly books, and JSTOR. And JSTOR is speaking on Thursday at 10:20. These are really interesting studies in the open access book space because of the fact that these are platforms that have closed content and open content and are measuring things similarly, and that open and closed content is kind of similar in character. So those are very important. Funders want to increase reach for strategic and equity reasons. So this is, partly it's the right thing to do, to try and provide more access for the global south, for developing countries, for example, but also it's a strategic investment in reaching particular populations that they're most interested in. And of course, when we talk about reach, we're not just talking about other countries, we're talking about more use in less wealthy institutions especially, and also access outside the academy. And that includes independent scholars, but it includes scholars with loose affiliations to our institutions. And finally, this big area of impact and engagement. And I was taught recently to just be so careful when talking about altmetric data, talking about indicators of engagement is the correct term, indicators of engagement, not metrics of usage. These are very partial measures, they're indicators. They give a sense of what's going on, but there's nothing comprehensive about the data sets they draw from. So, looking at altmetric tools, various altmetric tools, very interesting storytelling data coming out around policy use, news media, which is both general news media and very specific news media, and social media with all its problems. So just this emphasis on the desirability of telling stories rather than just showing numbers and visualizations of numbers. And that came up recently in conversations in the UK about whether altmetrics could be used as an equivalent for the storytelling that happens in the Research Excellence Framework. And the conclusion was it could not. So that. Just a few very quick slides just to show some of the work that we've been doing at Michigan. Use and reuse. The Springer Nature report talks about I think 7 times as many downloads for open access books as for closed access books on that platform. I'm a little bit uncertain about our data and our analysis now. We had 65 times as many downloads on the JSTOR platform of our open access books versus comparable closed access books. But I'm going to need to go back and check those numbers. Reach. So this is from the JSTOR study, the KU Research JSTOR study that's going to be presented later today. But I really like this as a storytelling tool. It's a little bit hard to see, but top 10 institutions for our open access book use on JSTOR. If you just read the names of those institutions, it feels really good. The University of Manila, University of Indonesia, Lakewood High School, they're using a book called Rethinking Child Pornography Law extensively. I do not know what's going on there. Anyhow, and then the reach maps, it's still an awful lot of dark red in the countries we're not so interested in, but it's starting to show some interesting stories. Impact and engagement. We use Outmetric for books, and we use Outmetric across our journals. And I think this is a nice example because this is a book funded by the Hewlett Foundation. It's funded as part of their Madison initiative, which is about increasing civic engagement, increasing engagement among citizens in terms of making them informed voters. It came out at slightly the wrong time, but it was released open access. And what we do see is a lot of evidence of the news media that might be reaching those particular voters, showing up, discussing the work. And that's exactly the kind of story that the Hewlett Foundation was very, very pleased to hear and really helped our case with them. So that's me.
Well, Charles, thanks very much indeed for that. I'd like to invite the other two panelists to join us up here on the podium because it's question time. We have about 10 minutes for questions, probably not long enough, but better than nothing. I don't think we've got a roving mic, so if you would like to ask a question, please put your hand up and shout very loudly, and then hopefully the panel will hear you.
Yeah.
There is a mic in the middle, so yes, actually, if you want to come to the front, I think that mic's working. Any questions at all, please? Ah, one at the back. Gentleman at the back, would you like to come to the front, please? Thank you.
I wonder if the panel had any thoughts on institutional identifiers and the need for those from an open access perspective. In the main session, we were talking about how IP-based identification is no longer sufficient, but I feel like the conversation is framed often around subscription and access issues. From a librarian's perspective, what more can be done to ensure that open access statistics are generated using appropriate affiliations?
I don't have the answer to that, but I think that it's a good point. I think there is, especially as we have more and more students who are learning at a distance, whether they are on different campuses of our university or taking online classes, it becomes more challenging to gauge usage of anything that they're doing if they're not coming in through our discovery system. And using our link resolver, for example. Yeah, I mean, I think somebody who knows more about the technology involved would probably be able to answer this question better, but we're not doing such a great job gauging how people who are on campus or in our library building are accessing open access content. So getting that information from people who are at a distance is even more challenging. I don't know if you, Charles.
I have a couple of rather tangential observations. One is there's been very interesting work by Knowledge Unlatched Research looking at geolocated access. And so if you look at University of Michigan, for example, the use of Knowledge Unlatched books was kind of mediocre, right? The books that we'd helped unlatch. If you look at Ann Arbor, geolocated, it's huge, absolutely huge. And it's as Hilary said, people are just not coming in through the discovery systems, but they're jolly well using that content. The second observation is related to what Yorgos Papadopoulos said this morning. The linking of our institutional repositories with the research information management systems feels really, really important to me. And this is really coming down to not only institutional identifiers, but identifiers within the institution, so affiliations within the institution, and making sure that the work that the scholars in those units deposit into the institutional repository is really giving them the credit that they deserve, and they're getting recognition from their department heads, for example.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, and apologies for the long walk up to the microphone. Any other volunteers? Oh, great, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Right. I do feel like this is the Academy Awards. I have a question about indicators of usage, and you were talking about alternative metrics being an indicator of usage, and that we don't know enough about that usage. But my question is do we know enough about metrics for commercial publishing? Aren't the metrics for commercial publishing also an indicator of usage? Could you talk a little bit more about the difference that you perceive those two? Thank you.
So the comparison or contrast you're making is between OA publishing and commercial publishing, if I understand. So I think the point we were trying to make about anything that's based on counting something is going to has limited, informational content. So, I mean, you can assume, for example, with downloads that content is being read. You can't necessarily assume that the reading of that content will contribute to, the knowledge creation enterprise in the way that we think about citation, for example. But even in the case of citation, when work is cited, there are many different reasons why a work might be cited. It could be to negate or argue with the work. And so there are limitations to all of these ways of measuring things. But I think Charles's point, he can speak for himself, but his point about altmetrics was that this is about online engagement with the content, and it's a pretty rough or broad kind of measure of attention, really. So.
Yeah. No. Amy's exactly right. I mean, but I do think with content that's been published, properly, conventionally published content, as opposed to grey literature, for example. There are these schemes in place like DOIs, like Crossref DOIs, that mean that we can have a pretty complete sample and we can fairly reliably see behaviors which use that, as long as, well, there are big caveats, right, as long as the reference was correct and things like that. But, I mean, it is the point that's important without metrics, much newer types of measures, and definitely not catching everything. And that's the not capturing every mention, not capturing every sort of discussion. And that was the indicators of engagement difference that I was trying to emphasize. Yeah.
Another question at the back. Oh, no.
I think this gentleman over
yes, in the middle.
People in the audience are saying no. I'm probably the wrong person to answer that question because I don't work that closely with our discovery system and how our resources are surfaced. But I mean, if you just, it follows naturally that if many of our users are finding what they need through Google and Google Scholar rather than even coming to the library website, that, I mean, we need to do a better job in making the discovery platform more appealing just in general, and then part of that is thinking about how we can arrange things in collections of materials. I know the Springer ebooks are, you are happy to have them used as course readings, and that's something that we want to promote as well. So I think the answer is probably, it depends. That's what I'll say with my copyright advisor hat on, because that's what I always say when people ask me a copyright question. And I think it applies here as well. I think it depends on how people are looking for that information. Are they looking for the portfolio of Springer open access ebooks, or are they looking for something very specific, and it doesn't matter what the resource is. It just depends on how people are approaching their search, I guess.
And I mean, yes, corpuses of open access books are one thing, but also individual open access books are another. And something I continue to check occasionally is whether some of the books that we unlatched through Knowledge Unlatched are appearing in Oasis. So we're a ProQuest customer, and when I look at some of the books that we've published quite a long time ago and were unlatched, they're still not appearing as open access, that there's an open access version available. And I know that ProQuest and EBSCO and OCLC are working on that, but it seems to be taking a long time. And I know there are some really important reasons around MARC and the way in which MARC represents if there's an open access edition, i.e. not very well. But there's quite a lot that we should be doing as librarians on that front.
I think we've come to the end of the session. I don't want to cut into the next session starting time. So I'd just like to give a big vote of thanks to our three panelists. And thanks very much to you for coming along and participating this morning. Enjoy the rest of the conference.